So my name's Joe Irvin. I'm Chief Executive of the National Association for Voluntary and Community Action, which is the national umbrella body for bodies like yours that cover Bristol and other local authority areas. In other words, the kind of support and development charities that help other charities and local voluntary and community organisations. And I've been in post 6 weeks. It seems like about 6 months, but in a good way, I think I said to Wendy. And lots have been happening, and it's obviously a really, it's a time when loads of things are happening in the area that's affecting us all. I sometimes think that now, just not looking at this year, but looking like the past 10 years and the next 10 years, looking at it a bit longer, it's like the best of times and the worst of times for the local and voluntary sector, because I can't remember a time when there's been so much recognition for the work that you do and we do, and public recognition. It kind of filtered up to politicians and they talked about big society or blue labour or something, but that's just a reflection of what the public have been saying. And I think it's because the public lost a bit of faith that the state was going to provide everything in a way that was responsive enough and respectful enough to everything they wanted. And they also lost a bit of faith in that the market was going to sort everything out. I think particularly after the banking crisis, that the market was going to do things or even result in a fair outcome. But the faith of the public in charities and the voluntary sector and community bodies is still really, really strong. So I think that's a really good thing. There are all sorts of things which means we're going to, I think, in the long term, be a growing movement. We're all living longer and healthier, and that means both will probably be more requirements and more demand for what we do, but actually more volunteers and people who are willing to help it. I've never subscribed to the idea that what they called an ageing population was a burden on society. And even like when they were talking about the demographic time bomb in the 80s, I was saying, well, hang on, my mother looks after our children sometimes. She's involved in the Women's Institute in her church. She goes and teaches English to Asian women in her town. She's not a burden on society. She's not working full-time anymore, but she's not a burden on society. And I think if we look at our society as a whole, I think all those social trends work with us. And when I left school, 5% of people went to university, and now 40–45% of people go to university. And I think a young person who's got that experience is more likely, I think, to volunteer or get involved in community action than somebody who was gone to work in a factory and had to work there, 9 till 5 or longer, 8 till 6 sometimes, and have to deal with all of that. So all these things are working with us, but it's the worst of times as well, because as we all know, we're in a period of austerity. We're all feeling the pain of cuts, both to our own organisations and the effect of cuts on our communities among the people we serve. So that's a really difficult time. But I would ask you to bear in mind that probably only, if the estimates of what the cuts might be, probably you go back to about 2005–04, that was about the level we were at then. So it's actually handling it which is part of the problem. And I think handling it in a way so that we're in really good shape, so that when the good times come again, we can really help people effectively. And the worst thing that happens in these times is that people look into themselves, or they shrink, or they don't cooperate with each other, and you end up losing the ability to help the people that you were set up to enable. So it's the best in times and the worst times. And the other thing that I always think, and I've been spending at least one day a week doing visits such as this to our members and to people in the voluntary community sector they work with, is you just see so many inspiring people. I'm sure you do. I'm sure many of you are those inspiring people, and you see inspiring people who, not because of money and not because they want a big bonus or not for any particularly self-interested way, will do things that benefit their community and benefit other people. And I just think that's will always stand us in good stead. But as I said, there's a time of austerity, and it's also a time of change, isn't it? So it's not just that there's less money, it's things are being shaken up in a big way. So the way public authorities relate to us, the health service, that's going to change somewhat. The way policing relates to us, I know you've been dealing with this morning, the way the council operates, are they going to do more commissioning of services, which I know Bristol I think you're doing and we're in the process of doing. And all of that's change, isn't it? It's about the change of where we go. And talking to Wendy just before, I've been to quite a few places, and actually, it seems to me here in Bristol, you've had lots of change to deal with. You know, you are you're very modern in the way that you work. Having an assembly like this, I went to Gloucester this morning. They have a kind of Gloucestershire assembly, but they're one of the very few actually. So for you to have a voice organisation like this, a representative organisation set up like this, is a modern and very effective way to keep up with the times and keep yourself in touch. So all this change is coming along. Localism, which you went through this morning. I went to see a load of ministers when I first started, Nick Hurd and Eric Pickles and various ministers, and senior civil servants. And one thing they all said was more and more decisions are going to be taken at local level. And personally, I'm not frightened of that. I think that can be an opportunity, because many of our organisations have been saying, why is these decisions being taken at, Whitehall, year after year? Nobody talks to us about it first. So if we do get more decisions locally, then that's an opportunity for us, because it helps us shape things in a way which will suit our communities and the people we work with. I think, in health, I told you that's changing, localism. So you've got to kind of get in and be in touch with the people who are making the decisions. If it's a new kind of setup, you need to be in touch with those people at the really earliest time, be in there, talking to them, try and shape things. Because, among our members I talk to, and the 160,000 charities and local voluntary and community organisations that they work with and support in their communities, there's not that many, not a very high percentage, are actually going to go in and bid and run a service for the local council. There's some will do it, and some will come together and do it, as people said in the film, actually, didn't they? As a consortium you might do it, or as a partnership you might do it, and they'll come and run things, and maybe they can do that in a way which they think will be a bit more responsive to the people you represent. But most charities and voluntary organisations aren't going to do that. It's a small percentage who actually go into that, but 70% of them are interested in having a say in how it's done and what the outcome is. So I think for every group that probably wants to go in, and good luck and get in good shape to help run a service effectively on behalf of the people that you serve, there's probably another 7, 8 or 9 who just want to have a bit of an influence in it. And the secret of that really is to A, be representative, B, be effective, and C, be in right at the beginning. And the earlier we're in any sort of discussion, the more you're going to help shape things, rather than somebody in the council's decided what it's going to be, and then you've got to deal with that. So I think those are all the sorts of changes that we're dealing with. One of the most difficult things that I would say that all of our organisations have to deal with at a time of change like this is keeping true to the principles and keeping true to the independent stance that you have, why you were set up in the first place. And you kind of need to always kind of go back and check, hang on, are we still? Is this what we were set up for? I can tell you a tale, and since it's being filmed, I won't mention any names. But an organisation which I'll tell you what it dealt with. It dealt with ex-offenders in the 80s, and I was very involved in programs like the youth training scheme. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember this. Perhaps some of you were youth trainees in the past. So, youth trainee scheme, youth opportunities program, community program. All these sort of things come back to haunt you and come back in another form, don't they? Somebody said, like, history repeats itself. the first time is it the first time as tragedy and the second as farce, I think it is. But anyway, so you'd see these schemes being built by the government now, and so somebody's only thought of them for the first time. And actually, there were similar schemes in the 80s when we had very high unemployment, very high youth unemployment, and some of them were good and some of them were pretty bad. But I do remember this organisation. What the government did is they started off, they went to the private sector, they said all of this is going to be done by the private sector. And then they found actually the private sector weren't interested enough to take on all these places and all these young people, unemployed people. Was that music? Sorry. Secondly, they then went to local authorities, but they didn't want local authorities employing all these people because they were trying to cut down on public servant numbers, right? Civil service and local government. So they came to the voluntary and charity sector. And many small charities were doing this, and actually doing a very good job, I think, because they were close to the community, they were a bit inventive, they engaged young people, and many of them were doing a good job. But then as the time went on, and the government and the Treasury were saying, well, we want you to do this a bit cheaper, and we want to cut some of the costs, and maybe one or two of them folded, or they think, well, we don't really want to carry on doing this, it's not really what we're about. There was a very big organisation that dealt with ex-offenders that took on more and more of these schemes, and swallowed them up, and became very big, and became very good at running all these schemes. The only trouble was that they'd forgotten that they were set up to deal with ex-offenders. And when the economy recovered and the scheme was reduced down again and closed down, they thought, well, they had to reassess what they were there for. So, you know, it's a bit of a salutary tale. I'm not saying they did a bad job of it, or that it was a bad thing that they did all that work. But you've just got to keep in mind what your basic reason for being is in any of our organisations. So that's that tale. I'll just say a little bit about NAVCA, and then, you know, if people want to ask any questions or put any points, then I'm here to answer any or comment on them. NAVCA, this National Association for Voluntary and Community Action, as I said, what we stand for is the charities that support other local charities, I guess. And so I'm banging the drum for local charities all the time, and I'm banging the drum for those charities that help support and train and nurture and encourage and advise and help the charities such as many of yours, or organisations such as yours, which are out there helping members of the public and helping young people get a good start in life, and helping elderly people have a decent life, and people with disabilities get on with their lives, and helping bring communities together in 1,000 ways. So that's what we stand for, and I'm just out there banging the drum for that. And my catchphrase at the moment, if you're interested, is if the big society is going to work, then the local society is going to work. And that means when they introduce schemes like the work programme, which you'll have heard of, it's been a bit controversial recently, and they said we think 40% of the delivery of this will be local voluntary and community bodies that will help people back to work. And then what the department did, they said, well, we'll have 20 massive great contracts, and they will ask for millions of pounds put on the table as collateral for any company that wants to get involved and then to take risk. And lo and behold, no charities, no local charities were able to meet those conditions, and largely big private companies moved in and took those contracts. And I'm not saying they're doing a bad job or a good job, I'm just saying if you want local voluntary and community bodies that are close to the community, close to the people, and are going to really be helpful to people, particularly people who've probably not been what they call a bit, you know, away from the labour market for a long time. They're a bit distant from the labour market. They've got problems. They might have drug problems. They might have family problems. They might have had a child very young. They might have learning difficulties. You know, all the sorts of things. It's not like everybody's very standard. So actually, our sector is very good at helping all of those people. But you won't do it very well if you make mega book contracts the way you're going to do it. And we've got to find ways of making sure that when governments and now local councils in more decisions and how they commission things, and the new structures they're going to be in health delivery and in policing, police commissioners, I think you're going to have to have a referendum on whether you want a mayor for Bristol, aren't you? I mean, if you like, I'll lend you Boris Johnson for a bit, but you'll have to decide whether you want that. But if that happens, that could change things again, couldn't it? And there might be other things that they decide to do that are going to affect you and how things are commissioned. So it's just being alive to all that. We've all got to change. I don't need to tell people here of that because you've been doing it over the past few years. But I think we've just got to make sure we maintain our independence. We always remember what we're about. And just remember the thing I said there, that you always must just take the time to think about why were we set up, why did we get ourselves together, or other people get themselves together to set up this organisation, and stay true to those principles. So that's my final words, and I think it's a great thing you're doing here. I think you've got a very good organisation helping you out, and wish you well with all of your work. Thanks.
Thank you.